call it all as much as you want, and I will. Mine is not on.
Welcome to Tower Green, ladies and gentlemen, which is the village green of the Tower of London. Now, up and down England, there is other village greens where they parks, slide, or even a sand. However, here, on my village green, I've got my own private executions. Don't confuse this, guys, with the public execution site up on Tower Hill. You have to be very well connected to be executed here. Now, before I tell you about some of the other executions, or these executions that have taken place here, 6 in total, including 3 Queens of England. I'm just going to explain about some other things. At the end of the tour, you can go and have a look at a few other things. So, the cobblestone path that you're now stood on, down to your left-hand side at the bottom, on the left-hand side is indeed the entrance to the Bloody Tower. Go in there, guys, because you can see the exhibition about the 2 boy princes and Sir Walter Raleigh, who spent 13 years of his life incarcerated at the Tower. Now, 2 places you can't go now, but I'm going to tell you about them. If you look to the bottom of Tower Green, can you see those 3 blue doors? These are indeed homes to some of my fellow Yeoman warders and our families. So not only do we live in the outer wall, we also live on Tower Green. In the corner, you can see a Tudor building, the black and white one in the corner, ladies and gentlemen. This is the only surviving Tudor, authentic Tudor building in London. If you see any throughout London, they are all fake. This is the only surviving one. Of course, all the rest were burnt down in the Great Fire of London. This is the Queen's house, which is the private residence of the Constable of the Tower of London and his family, basically the boss, who's been appointed by Her Majesty the Queen. Many, many famous prisoners have been held inside the Queen's house over the years. Do you want to know about some? Yes. Have any of you heard of Guy Fawkes? Guy Fawkes, or his real name was Guido Fawkes. On the 5th of November 1605, he tried to detonate 36 barrels of gunpowder beneath the Houses of Parliament, trying to kill King James I and all his important ministers. He was caught during that act, and he was brought here, where he was interrogated in the council chamber of the Queen's house. He refused to name his fellow conspirators, and so, on orders of the King, he was taken to the White Tower, where for 4 days he lay on the rack. Now, that's not a wine rack, ladies and gentlemen. That's the most brutal instrument of torture that was here at the Tower of London. 4 days he lay on that rack. 4 days he was twisted, 4 days he was pulled. Every single joint in his body was dislocated. Funnily enough, he named the rest of his conspirators. And for his reward, he was taken to the Old Palace Yard of Westminster. Was he knighted? No. He was hung, drawn, and quartered. Guy Fawkes, of course, being the defiant man that he was, had the last laugh. As he was climbing up on that gallows to be hanged, for the first time he jumped. He jumped high, and he jumped high enough where he broke his own neck. So he killed himself on those gallows. Of course, the bloodthirsty crowd were there to be entertained. So the hangman carried on and hanged him a further 2 times, not before inserting a knife and drawing him from nipple to navel, pulling out all of his innards, and then quartering 4 quarters. They were placed around London as a warning to the rest of those conspirators. This is what's going to happen to you when you get caught. Another famous prisoner to be held on the top floor of the Queen's house was William Penn. During his time as a prisoner, he wrote a controversial pamphlet called No Cross, No Crown, which of course made the king even more cross. Because he was banished from England, go across Atlantic. And it was there, on the other side, where he would go to the Americas. And he founded his famous Quaker colony known as Pennsylvania. Any Pennsylvanians here today? Founded by an English criminal. Did you know that, young lady? Do now if you didn't. Named in honour of his father. Now, one of the last state prisoners to be held here in the Queen's house was Rudolf Hess, and he was deputy leader of Nazi Germany, and he was imprisoned for 4 days in May 1941. The Blitz started to happen in London, so he was moved to Surrey, where he would go in safety. At the end of the war, of course, he was taken back to Berlin, where he was tried for his crimes against humanity. So Winston Churchill believed we would have been so successful at capturing Hitler that he had a toilet plumbed into the chamber, Rudolf Hess prison chamber, ready for Hitler to be captured, the strong room. Remember that, guys? I mentioned the strong room. The toilets are still there to this day. It's in full working order. It's known as Hitler's crapper. Behind me and over there is the Beecham Tower. This is the state prison. Behind that window, behind that arch window, and there you can see another ghost on the left-hand side. Oh, there's two in there now. Behind that window are over 80 inscriptions carved into the wall by prisoners, some of which date back more than 450 years. Behind me, you can see two blue doors. The one directly behind me is the home of the Tower Doctor. We have our own doctor here at the Tower. If there's something wrong with us and he can't fix us, we go next door to the chaplain. A bit of divine intervention. He's got a great job, ladies and gentlemen. It takes him 7 seconds to get to work. And he works 1 day a week. Not bad. We are very shortly going to go into the chapel, ladies and gentlemen. The long building behind you, can you see that long building? This is the Waterloo block, or the Waterloo Barracks. Built in 1845 and designed originally to house over 1,000 soldiers based here at the Tower Garrison. It's now the home of the Crown Jewels and Royal Regalia. You can enter that building through the doors below the parade ground floor. Crown Jewels, of course, estimated to be worth some £300 billion, 11.5 tons of gold in there, and also the largest cut diamond in the world, the Cunningham diamond. Okay, the Cunningham 1 diamond. Over 570.3 carats. Don't forget those points there. Now, when you go in there, ladies and gentlemen, specifically ladies, you're going to get all excited and smile. Okay, no window shopping. Nothing compares to the diamonds in there. I get asked every single day, are they the real crown jewels? I say, bang on the glass and see what happens. They're all out. Behind you, ladies and gentlemen, is the White Tower. This is the Tower of London, built on orders of William the Conqueror in 1078. And it took 20 years to build under the direction of a man called Gundulf and Beck. That's Gundulf, not Gandalf. Well, we probably did have a big stick and beat his word. The tower stands just over 90 feet high, and the walls vary in thickness from 15 feet at the base to 8 feet at the top. In each corner you can see a turret. 3 are square and 1 is round, and those of you can see the round one right here. This is where the first Royal Observatory was sited. And then in the middle of the 17th century it moved from the Tower of London to Greenwich, where it's still there to this day. So, the royals and the monarchs of the day would have lived on the top floor of the White Tower. The next floor down the middle would have been for knights and their ladies, and the floor below this would have been mainly used for servants. However, there is another floor that's below the ground level. Give me up. Now it's here, ladies and gentlemen, a dark and evil place. Does anybody know what it was used for? Speak up loud! Torture! No, not torture! It was originally the place where you stored your wine. What thirsty lot, you are. However, you are right, sir. It did later go on to be the place of torture and imprisonment. A dark and evil place that would have been lit only by the torturous candles. There is absolutely no way any screams or cries of pain would have been heard through those thick walls. It's now the home of the gift shop. I'll be listening to your, I'll be listening to your screams and cries of pain as you part with your hard-earned cash. Now, before you do part with your hard-earned cash, ladies and gentlemen, would you like to know about some of the executions? Cool. Now, the first execution I'm going to tell you about took place right here in 1536. It's that of Queen Anne Boleyn. Anne spent the last 18 days of her life imprisoned here in the Great Hall, which now no longer stands, on charges of adultery, incest, and even incest with a brother. She was condemned to death. She was so afraid of the block and axe that she asked to be beheaded in the French method with a double-edged sword. The executioner was so good at his job. The sword was so sharp. When the executioner picked up her severed and still bleeding head right here, it is said that gasps came from the crowd. A second gasp came from the crowd. Good. Because, ladies and gentlemen, her lips were still moving in prayer and her eyes were still fluttering around. Now, 1542, the axe fall twice, ladies and gentlemen, on the same day. The first person to be executed, the first victim, was Queen Catherine. She was also condemned to death, and as she stood on her execution scaffold site just here, she declared very, very loud and very, very proud, although I die the Queen of England, I would rather die the wife of Thomas Culpeper. Imagine his face from the audience. However, ladies and gentlemen, King Henry VIII was already onto him. as he was hung, drawn and quartered 3 months previous at Tyburn. Now the second person to be executed on that day was Catherine's lady-in-waiting Jane Boleyn. Being a gossip of the court, it is alleged that she was fully aware of the Queen's illicit affair but neglected to tell the King. Now, 12 years later, 12 years on from that, ladies and gentlemen, the axe would fall again. Only this time, the victim was the very, very young, very, very innocent 16-year-old Lady Jane Grey. She was the uncrowned queen of only 9 days. Now, after the death of her cousin, King Edward VI, she was declared queen. So on his deathbed, he wrote to Parliament saying that she will be the next in line to in the throne. She was pushed onto the throne by her ambitious relative. She was forced onto the throne. And it was from the White Tower where she did indeed rule for only those 9 days. Because the rightful heir to the throne, Queen Mary Tudor, she petitioned Parliament, proving that she was the rightful heir to the throne. So she regained power by force, storming the Tower of London. Jane, of course, was sentenced to death along with her husband of the dead. Jane was imprisoned at number 5 Tower Green, the upper right-hand window. From that window, ladies and gentlemen, of Tower Green, which was the jailer's house at the time, she would have looked out pretty much to where we are standing right now. She would have seen her husband being dragged out of the Beecham Tower, over the cobbles, kicking and screaming. She would have seen him thrown down the stairs that we just walked up. She would have also heard the cheers from the crowd up on Tower Hill as she realised he had met his end. She would have also, no doubt, have seen a small handcart being brought back over the parade ground behind you, containing the headless corpse of her husband. If that wasn't enough torture or torment for her, she would have looked out on the South Lawn, watching the Tower carpenters prepare her own scaffold. 12th of February 1554 was surely a sad day in English history. I'm sure you're all listening. It doesn't matter though, ladies and gentlemen, if you were executed up on Tower Hill or down here on Tower Green, because your body would have almost certainly found its way either under the grass, under the floor, or even under the altar of the chapel hall. We're going to go in there very, very shortly, ladies and gentlemen. I must remind you that this is still a Christian place of worship. Therefore, can I ask you please to respect the religion? Gentlemen, if your religion permits, please remove your hats before you enter. Bad hair day, sorry. Are you kidding me?